Today on Virginia Legends podcast, I have Coach Vance Harmon, who's a legend at Virginia Union University. Has had an awesome coaching career at primarily at Henrico High School. He's back at his alma mater, Freeman, where he was quite a player, and he's AD now for the last 4 years. Coach, great to meet you. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. And fan of the show and love all the different personalities you bring on to talk basketball.
Well, thanks, Coach. Well, you coaches, you guys are personalities. You know that. I mean, you got
For
guys
better
like
or for worse.
Oh yeah, I mean like guys like Lancaster and all you coaches are you guys are showmen. That's what you guys do.
Well, it's funny you should say Lancaster, and I can get into that a little bit later. But yeah, he was Coach Land's been around. I played against him when he was coach, and then of course we had some of our greatest rival games against Highland Springs through the year. I mean, just epic kind of games. So he's certainly a mentor as well.
He's been known to have a couple horses on his team as well, right?
Yeah, I'd say that's putting it mildly. Yes, he
Yeah,
they in the east end of Henrico County, I think something's in the water with all the talent that comes through
exactly.
year in year out.
Or maybe somehow they magically appear in that in the Highland Springs school district. Like
No, no, I tell they've been doing that since he got there in 1970, mid 70s or so. I mean, they stay stocked with talent. It's unbelievable.
football as well. And I know that I mean, nowadays if you're a great coach, people are gonna move into your district as well, even though I'm sure he's got a lot of great athletes. We'll get to that. And I have a lot of respect for Coach Lancaster, so I'm not trying to imply anything.
Yes,
Let me talk about your record first. In 20 seasons of coaching, you had a 74% winning percentage. You won two state championships in Henrico, I believe two in 3 year span.
that's
You
right.
won three regional titles, numerous state appearances and regional appearances, of course. You also coach at J.R. Tucker. I believe that's also in Henrico County.
That is right. That's in the western part of the county, and that was kind of when I was cutting my teeth the first 7 years of my career, as far as being an assistant and head coach for a couple of years.
Yeah, Tim Legler went to Tucker. Is that right?
That's right. Good memory. 3 point NBA 3 point contest. And he's another one who I could certainly tie into my growing up as well.
Wait, exactly. Yeah. So you probably knew him. Well, you were a 90 Freeman graduate,
That's
you're
right.
94 Virginia Union graduate. My dad went to Virginia State. Know a lot about that huge, massive rivalry. You won the 3 point contest yourself at the
That's right.
CIAA tournament, which I'm sure was, or All-Star game, which I'm sure was a really cool thing. Um, I thought I would start by asking you, um, as a white player at HBCU, that doesn't happen every day. It happens in soccer. You see it in some sports, but it doesn't happen a lot in basketball. How has that formed your career? How is the fact that you're able to be one of the only white guys on the floor? I know you had to be diplomatic. You had to gain respect. There's a lot of things you had to do to make it in the CIAA. How did that help your career and everything that came after your years at Union?
Well, first of all, the experience at Virginia Union, I mean, I absolutely loved it. Played for Coach Dave Robbins, who, as you know, is a Hall of Famer. And of course, he started Union probably in 78 or 79 and got their run of national championships started with the 1980 national championship. This is pre Charles Oakley, by the way. They had Larry Holmes and uh, Coach Willard Coker played for Coach Robbins on that 80 team. In fact, Keith Valentine did too, who started at North Carolina and then came from Dean Smith, North Carolina, back home to Richmond. And I don't know if people remember, but Keith Valentine played for Coach Robbins at TJ in the 75, 76 range,
With
where they won a state.
Otis Fulton too, right, Coach?
Otis Fulton, they won a state championship. And in fact, they had one of the more probably in arguably the most memorable games in Richmond high school basketball history when they played Maggie Walker with Clyde the Glide Austin and sold out the Richmond Coliseum at the time, which was probably 12,000 seats. So Coach Robbins, I mean, he's not only a household name here in Richmond, the 804, he's also, I mean, legitimately, he's a basketball Hall of Famer. But to go back, to have the chance to play for Virginia Union, which was just a storied basketball program, is a storied basketball program. My goal was always to play for the best team that I could play for and play for a coach who I thought was just the gold standard of coaches. And so they checked both boxes, Virginia Union did. And it just so happened that a bunch of the guys that were on the Union team, coach always made it kind of a priority to recruit locally. And so we had probably 7 or 8 local guys from the Richmond 804 area, namely like Warren Peebles from John Marshall, Reggie Jones, John Marshall. I mean, I could go on with name 5 or 6 more, and I don't want to leave people out. But I mean, as the recruiting process is going on, those guys were reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, it'd be fun to kind of, run this thing back. We competed against each other for so long when you were at Freeman, and we were at George Wythe and Matoaka and John Marshall and Petersburg and so forth. Let's go ahead and get together and see what we can do." And I was all for it. I mean, I loved the idea of being on a really competitive team. I knew I wasn't going to be the guy. I was just a normal guy on the team as far as, I mean, we had all Americans, we had players of the year in Division II. So it was a great experience. And I can safely say I was the best white guy in the CIAA because I was the only white guy in the CIAA, as well as obviously Virginia Union on campus. So it was an interesting experience. I never one time, nothing seemed unusual. The hardest thing getting adjusted to was there was so much talent on the team that literally our second five could go up and give the battle against the first team. And then there was a bunch of us on the second five that didn't crack as much playing time as we wanted to. So it was fun. We were part of every year I was there. We won the CIAA championship, and we won the national championship in '92 and got to the Final Four in '91. I mean, it was just great experience. And it primed me for doing what I wanted to do, which was become a teacher and a coach.
Yeah. Kenny Scroggins was on that team also, right?
Kenny Scroggins transferred from George Mason, I believe. And Kenny, in fact, was my roommate on a lot of trips and road trips. And Kenny was a left-handed jumping jack, and he was just a phenomenal guy. And again, we had like Kenny Scroggins. I believe he played major minutes, probably for Mason at some point in time during his career. And then we had a fellow named Robert Mackay, who was a top 50 recruit when he came out of high school in Florida and went to Auburn and started at Auburn and transferred to Union and was a second teamer. I mean, it was just people that was in the Prop 48 era. So there was a lot of guys who couldn't get the academics straight to go Division I or didn't want to go and sit out a year, but rather came to Union and, opted for that route. And I'm telling you, between Charles Oakley was pre my time, but then you had Oakley, Terry Davis, AJ English, Ben Wiles was post my time. I mean, Union was a factory for pros.
Yeah. Well, Richmond has a very complicated race relations. From a guy from Northern Virginia, we always consider Richmond very Southern to us, even
Right.
though we're not perfect up here by
Sure.
any means. Did people question that or ask you, hey, what you're going to Union? What are you doing? Did it seem strange to people at the time that you're going to Union?
I think the people that knew me and know who I am to the core and understand that I'm just a guy like everybody else trying to chase their dream. And I was more concerned with trying to kind of chase my dream and get my career launched on the right foot, as well as find the best landing spot for me in college that I could. And so those people, no, I don't think anybody questioned that. The only question might have been like, do you know you're putting yourself in a situation where it's loaded, a team's loaded with talent, and your minutes might be limited, and you could go somewhere else and be, one of, start or be one of the, guys that plays a lot. I said, yeah, but it's about the experience of wanting to be something that's bigger and better than I am. And if I can earn it, I want to earn it. If I can't earn it, then I want to do the best I can, and so be it. People didn't know me, I think, would say not things to my face, but wonder like, the heck are you doing? I mean, that's out of the bubble. Like, whatever. I mean, I've been a guy who kind of marches to my own beat for my life.
Yeah. Do you think it'd have been different if you did that today than it was then, or you think it's the same, or have things changed down in Richmond?
I think things always evolve, and I really think it's more of a chemistry situation. And again, I go back, Coach Robbins being from the Richmond area itself, and part of his kind of what he did, not only did he's known for recruiting some high end players like big guys, especially with Wallace and Oakley and Terry Davis and so forth, but also too, he did recruit some smallish guards mixed in with it, and he really recruited the backyard of Richmond. So for him in doing that, no, I don't think it was that big of a deal. Now today, Coach Butler, Jay Butler, who was a teammate of mine from the DC area, I don't know that he recruits Richmond as hard maybe as Coach Robbins did because he has a few more DC guys on the roster. So I think it all depends really on who's leading the program. And I mean, so would it be different to some degree? But I don't think anything. Everybody has their own style and their niche, and that's what Coach relied on.
I think it's wonderful. Do coaches spend a lot of time recruiting white players when they know most likely they're not going to come? I mean, because they knew you were a local guy, and you knew the guys who were going to go there, so that kind of led to the fact that they were going to recruit you. But generally, I don't think teams in the CIA spend a lot of time recruiting white players, do they?
I can't speak to that. I can tell you with Coach, and I think he'd be the first one to tell you because he and I still are very close to this day. Coach wanted to recruit players who were talented and who were winners. Color, I mean, it didn't matter. If people wanted to run, they would come down to Barco Stevens, the gym at 3 p.m. on the weekdays out of season, whether you were from University of Richmond, VCU, Virginia State, some of the best high school, made no difference. If you were a player and you were a good guy, that's who he kind of wanted you in the program. And if you weren't, and again, Coach was, I mean, he was the only white coach in the conference, I think, as long as I can go back to probably I'm sorry. At the Fayetteville State coach, I believe, is white fella. I can't remember his name. But for the longest time, Coach was the only white one.
Wow. Yeah.
And here's the funny connection, too. I'm not trying to get off sideways too much. So I was recruited to Virginia Union to play there and played for Coach. And then the only other white guy that played at Union, his name was Tommy Leary. Tommy Leary, this was in the early 70s, went to Virginia Union. I believe he played for Tricky Tom Harris, who was the coach there then. Tommy went to Hermitage. His coach at Hermitage was Larry Parpert at Hermitage, who also was my high school coach at Douglas Freeman. Wow. So you talk about a small world.
Yeah.
And Tommy Leary went on to become a police officer and a retired guy and good player that Coach Parpert coached both of us. And here's the other twist of fate. Tommy Leary's grandson actually goes to Freeman and asks my daughter to homecoming, not knowing any of the connection. I mean, so you talk about small world. Richmond's not like a 2-stoplight town, but I mean, it's crazy some of the connections things can have.
Yeah, it seems like it's probably meant to be in some
ways. Yes, I would agree.
What about socially? Union has the service fraternities and not the fraternity life you may see at UVA or
Right.
VCU or whatever. Socially, did you enjoy the social life? Did you engage in just the Black social life there, or were you hanging out with guys in the city? What was it like socially for you?
Socially, again, I think I'm the kind of person that if you were to drop me in any particular crowd, I can get along with anybody. I'll talk to anybody. I'll listen to anybody. I respect everybody as far as what's going on. So socially, I had a great time. I went to class. I did my work. I minded my business. I made friends. I've made some lifetime friends, not only just the basketball, but in teaching and education. And people I still, and professors who were mentors, people I still stay close with today. And as far as the fraternity part, that was always a thing that was frowned upon from a basketball perspective, because Coach always said it was kind of the rule was you're there on this is business after you got your education, and basketball is the fraternity. So that's what the guys did. Basketball was the fraternity, and that was I never heard anybody get upset or not pleased with that. Yeah. I know some football guys and some other athletes were in fraternities, but basketball was kind of, again, I know some football people would probably disagree, but Union, the basketball was at the top of the line, I believe.
Yeah. What did you learn from Coach Robbins that you use in your own coaching?
I think the biggest takeaways would be, one, if you want to be a successful coach, you better have talent, because you're kidding yourself. Yeah, unless you have the right pieces, you're only going to be but probably so successful. So as he would say oftentimes, you never seen a jockey win the Kentucky Derby that was riding a mule. You had talent and you had pieces that could play. Now, that also he's being humble about that because coach was, I mean, I think he's probably one of the sharpest basketball minds that you'll ever run across. I mean, I'd put him up against any NBA coach, college coach, or whatever, just as far as his acumen. He understands people's what makes people tick on and off the floor. And I think when he can establish those relationships right there, then he can then take that over to the court and get people to do things that maybe he can get them to reach a whole other level. You know, he can maximize them. And that's with X's and O's, that's with people skills, you name it. And he was always very attentive to detail, that details in practice, details in a game, details all the time. There was never going to be a situation that has not been prepared for, whether it be practice or game. And I think what I took from him additionally, too, was the fact that, you know, you had to be genuine, you had to be real, and you had to earn everything. You know, things weren't going to be given to you just because. Whether you were started last year or last game, you had to earn it in practice. You had to keep earning it every day, every year. And so it was that level of competition that breeded that competition amongst the players. And they saw that when he had success, if you trust the system, if you trust the process, you will end up being successful, whether it be from playing, whether it be with a career you chose to do. He's networked as far as that goes. And from a coaching perspective, he taught me, like, you can't stress the details too much and you can't leave stones unturned. We would go over, we'd run sets all the time. And so that people could read each other through their eyes and non-verbally and verbally. So it was a fantastic experience.
Yeah. Well, you're in a relatively new years of the 3-point stripe. How did he embrace the 3-point stripe? Was he an early embracer of it? Did he allow you guys to do it, or was he kind of a little old school one to go inside because you had some great athletes?
Yeah, I would say, you know, before analytics became the buzzword, coach has always been about percentages. Okay. And I guess percentages would be the pre-modern day term for analytics. And as an example, you know, to say that he did embrace it, but it wasn't like he stressed it, because the adage of playing inside out and utilizing your bigs was always the first priority offensively. You know, he's famous for his high-low games and the two-man actions off that, but he always wanted to establish yourself inside and work inside to out, which is probably a little bit, I'd say it's a little bit different than today's standard. And also, too, I guess where his percentages or analytics came in, and to my point, I kind of believe the same thing. You know, you can shoot much better from 8 feet away than you can 7 feet and 6 feet and 5 feet. And you shoot better than you do, you know, from 19.9 or 21 feet, whatever the college is. So he wasn't going to go hunt the 3-point shot. He believed in things like as a team, we should make more free throws and the other team should shoot. And that was one of his big things, which stresses, again, get the ball into the interior, get paint touches, play inside out. He was always big on rebounding. I mean, if you can limit a team's offensive rebounds, it means you get more possessions. Possessions ultimately turn into opportunities for you. And then finally, the whole assist to turnover ratio, you know, always shooting for a 2.5 to 1 ratio on assist to turnover. So yes, it was different. The game was not, I'd say if we took 12 3-pointers a game, I'd say that was a lot back then. You
For
know,
everybody.
yeah, it just wasn't stressed. If you're open and it's the right person shooting it, let it rip. But he wasn't going to say, hey, scrap the middle game. Like today, pretty much from 8 feet to 17 feet is done. You just don't see teams doing it. They'd rather shoot a gazillion threes. He just always believed in good, sound, balanced basketball.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Robbins influenced you by the fact that you need players and you need to have a competitive environment in practice. You didn't mention so much that tactically he influenced you, but the things you just mentioned in terms of the high low in terms of more foul throws made than other team attempts. Did you implement these things in your coaching? Because at Henrico, you had some athletes as well.
Yeah, we did. We had great talent. And I think I believe what you have to do, and I tried to do was, our high school coach, Larry Parker, we were very successful, not to the level of winning state championships, but we were certainly in the region level. We were top 10 in the region. And Coach Robbins was a national championship winner in conference. So I tried to take bits and pieces of the people that I had played for. Like, for example, my high school coach he was scripted to the second on practice. I mean, detailed, like, you're going to do these 8 things. It's going to be this time. And bam, he stuck to the schedule.
You said
Coach
Larry
Robbins,
Parker? His name was Larry Parker?
Parker, Parpart, Parker. Coach Robbins was more, I never saw him with a sheet of paper in his hand as far as at practice schedule goes. Like, it's going to be 11 minutes for this, 14 minutes for that. He had 2 or 3 stress points, and he wanted to make sure he hammered them home with us in practice to go over things. So he did it until he felt that we could do it like just like muscle memory with our eyes closed. And so I think I took a little bit of pieces of those and put them towards my own style. But what I did learn is if I had players, I would give them a lot more leash and a lot more flexibility. I would give them the framework, and then we would roll from there. Both coaches were unbelievable at controlling tempo. At Freeman, of course, this again, the 3-point line didn't come in high school until my sophomore year. So again, if we shot 10, 12 threes a game, it was a lot. But we were always 2-2-1 in back to a matchup zone or a man. Trying to slow you up. At Union, we were trying to speed you up because we had superior athletes. So controlling tempo and learning methods of controlling tempo was a thing that I really took. I think I took successfully to our high school programs.
Yeah. Did you come from a coaching family?
So yes, my dad coached. In fact, again, small world. He was the assistant coach, JV coach and assistant coach at Henrico from I think 74 up until about 1988 or so. So he coached there as an assistant, but I was always a gym rat hanging around the gym with my dad at Henrico. So I grew up literally in Henrico's gym, always being around Coach Guy Davis, who was another I would consider a mentor. He was probably the godfather of Henrico or father of Henrico basketball. Coached 26 years there and coached a lot of fantastic players. Again, watching him and watching the teams that he was able to take and shape and do really well with, I took bits and pieces from that. And that's where I got to learn what the north side of the community was all about at Henrico, so that I saw it and I knew how much talent was in Henrico. There was talent year in and year out there, but for whatever the reason, Henrico just couldn't quite get over the hump. And we were fortunate to get over the hump a few times.
Yeah, Henrico does not have that big sporting name that, like Northern Virginians, we wouldn't really recognize Henrico as much as some of the other. We hear the same names over and over again when it comes to state playoffs in football and state tournament in basketball. Henrico was not a name that stood out, but that's something you were able to get them over the hump. Now, didn't my friend Mark Seidenberg go to Freeman? I believe he did, right?
Mark Seidenberg was my yes. He's 5 or 6 years older than I am. He went to Freeman. His first teaching job was at Freeman, and he was one of our assistant basketball coaches. Mark's getting inducted in the VHSL Hall of Fame coming up here in a couple weeks at the dinner. Mark, he's a basketball guy to the core, but additionally, he coached tennis, won a state championship at Freeman, and then he went to Godwin to coach basketball and tennis and won, 10, 11, 12 girls state tennis championships. So I don't know if he would say he's a tennis guy first or basketball, but he's a heck of a coach and a great guy.
I've interviewed him. You should listen to him. I think he's a fascinating guy, as you know. Yeah. What was he like to coach against?
So I only coached against Mark when I was at Tucker for a couple years.
That's right, because he got out of basketball.
He got out of basketball probably when I was coming into it as a coach, like 96, 97 range, give or take. He was, you talk about a guy who didn't really embrace 3-pointers too much and was straight kind of man to man. And it's man to man, or the other option is man to man, or the other option is a harder man to man. I mean, there was no in between. And you know, when you think of like Big Ten basketball, the old school Big Ten basketball, Bobby Knight, that's probably what I would say with him. He was just he got so wound up and so intense that you could see it and feel it. And but he was great. It was fun to learn from him and actually coach against him because he wanted to keep the tempo down in the daggone mid 30s.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, it was an interesting style of basketball. I mean, and they always say it's easier to slow the games down than it is to speed them up.
Yeah.
And he was a master of slowing them down because he didn't have annually the talent that a lot of the other teams did.
Yeah. Well, Coach, as you know, my roommate when I was in at UVA was Rob White. He was a girls basketball coach there, girls soccer
Sure.
coach, and yeah, and he's a great guy. He coached
Know
girls
Rob
basketball
very
too.
well.
Yeah, Rob's a great guy, and so I have a feel for what Mills Godwin's like is like. And what about Tucker, Henrico, and Freeman? Are these schools very different demographically, different feel, or is it much different than these Henrico County schools?
Yes. So you've got 9 Henrico County high schools. Okay. And if you can kind of wrap your head around, they're basically, you break them into thirds as far as you've got in the western part of Henrico County, you've got Deep Run in the far west, Short Pump. That's, if not the biggest, that's certainly one of the biggest schools in Henrico County, the Division Six. That school was built in the late 90s, early 2000s. That's more the quote newer money. I would say that's more similar to say a Riverside area, probably that Deep Run. Godwin came about in 81, 82. That's a little bit closer west end. Um, Freeman's been around since 1954. So those are your 3 West End schools. Traditionally, it was Freeman, Godwin kind of were always battling neck and neck. And it's kind of still that way, but Deep Run's kind of taken over as the new kid on the block as far as uh, who you want to beat in the West End, I would say. Then you go shift to the central part of the county where you've got J.R. Tucker, which is definitely it's the newest school, it's the biggest school, it's the most inclusive school as far as the breakup of demographically. Tucker doesn't have one feeder public school, middle school that goes to it. It kind of gets parts of about 4 different middle schools, which makes it very tough to coach and teach because you're not getting you can't look down to your pipeline and see what's coming up to you necessarily, which is a little disjointed, I think, too. You got Glen Allen, which is a newer school as of like 2007 or 8. And you've got Hermitage. Those 3, Tucker, Glen Allen, Hermitage, kind of sit in the central part of the county. Then in the north and eastern part, you got Henrico, which was built in 62, Verona, which was built roughly the same time, and Highland Springs, which has been around probably since, gosh, I would say the 1940s or earlier,
Oh wow.
Highland Springs. But as far as there's a vast difference demographically, you've got mostly, I'd say you've got, and Henrico County is majority minority, by the way. So just in general. So you've got a definite feel and look going on in the East End versus the West End and then the Central. So it's very interesting mix of of makeup of kids and families. And I think you find a lot of football, basketball based clientele, a lot more in the East, and then a lot more of the suburban, the tennis, lacrosse, soccer's out in the West. And in the Central, you've got kind of a mix, a hybrid of the two.
Yeah. And culturally, are they much different than Chesterfield and Hanover schools? Or are they about the same
I
mix?
would say culturally, I think Hanover is a lot more homogenous. I don't think you see near the level of diversity going on there. And again, keep in mind, it's smaller. You only got 4 high schools in Mechanicsville, Hanover, Patrick Henry, and Atlee. You've only got 4 there. Chesterfield, I'd say, is definitely bigger. Well, it's bigger population wise and land size than Henrico. And I don't know how many high schools they have, but I would say that's as diverse, if not more, than Henrico County. So I'd say that's more of a comp, Chesterfield to Henrico. Schools maybe not quite as old.
Mhm.
I think probably you've got your Thomas Dale's in there. Of course, that's more Chester. So that's not like in Chesterfield. So yeah, Midlothian is probably your oldest Chesterfield school. So it's funny because I think Midlothian is the comp for Freeman. James River is the comp for Godwin. Cosby's the comp for Deep Run. You've got very similar. Monacan's Glen Allen. that's just again a complete I'm just spitballing that, but that's what I think it is.
Yeah. Well, so by the time you were playing high school basketball, you came along at a very interesting time. The Richmond complexes were breaking up. So
Yeah,
when I was in high school, Jefferson Huguenot With won the state championship with the great Pete Wolfook, Alvin Lee, and then Marshall Walker had won the 2 years before that with Willie Jennings and Ronnie Wade and all
Tim
those.
Lewis. Tim Lewis might have been a part of that group. I think he was. I'm not
I
sure.
think I think so. But those are some of the greatest high school teams in the history of the state because they were virtual all stars. You're putting three schools in one building, and they were unbelievably talented teams. But even when those schools broke up, With was coached by the great I think it's Bob Booker was his name,
Yep.
an amazing defensive coach. John Marshall, one of the best teams that didn't win the state championship was a team with people that you mentioned. Some of your um, uh,
Frank Threets. Yep.
that team was amazing. They got upset by, I think, Robert E. Lee from our way.
Yep.
But anyway, what was going on in your eyes in Richmond basketball about the time you were going to high school?
And I know it makes you sound old when you say it, but the amount of talent that was in Richmond, I don't think, unless you were from Richmond or really studied the game hard, I don't think you could understand how much depth of talent there was in the area. Just when it came to, again, the teams you rattled off with the complexes, you had Marshall Walker, Pierce Callahan. They had their run. They were dominant. You had JHW, Bob Booker, again, loaded with talent. And then you had maybe a little bit lesser known as Armstrong Kennedy under Fletcher Johnson, and Walter Penny, I believe, helped coach there a little bit too. But those teams were, as you said, they were kind of all-star teams, but still you had your Richmond teams like Petersburg, who could compete with the best of them.
Hopewell.
Uh, Hopewell under Bill Littlepage. Petersburg was Bill Lawson, the dad,
He was great.
not
Yeah.
not junior. And of course, Carl Peel coached Moses, back in the day. That was in the 70s. So yeah, that was a whole different. And of course, it's pre 3-point line. It was, that was just a very different vibe as far as the game itself. And then finally, those city complexes broke up. I believe it was about 84 or 85, but 2 years before I got in high school, and they were still great teams. I mean, again, to throw it out, when I was coming along in our Colonial district, we had TJ under Jay Johnson, who was off the Bob Booker tree. And of course, their main guy was Kendrick Warren. And then we had John Marshall, and Frank Threets was their coach. And they had Peebles, Reggie Jones, Milton Bell, Jason Williford, Ray Lawrence, Ray Hood. I mean, the list goes on of guys that were players. And that's who I grew up playing against. And that team that lost to Lee was the team with Milton Bell and Peebles and Jones. And
Great
I mean,
team.
they still look. I saw Ray Hood, who was the point guard of that team, about a couple weeks ago, and he still to this day talks about losing that game. I think it was in John Marshall's eyes, it was, we spit the bit there at the end and didn't finish it off rather than the team beat us. But I mean that, and those days going back as far as the basketball, I always argue that team in PH Roanoke with Curtis Blair and Percy Covington and Basham, Russell Turner, that beat Alonzo Mourning.
I think if you got George, I think if you got George Lynch, coach.
Did I forget to George? Oh, he's an easy one. I mean, that's what I'm talking. And they just didn't beat Indian River. They handled them. It was at the Robbins Center. I think it was in '87. It might have been '88. I think it was '87. And I'm telling you, that team was probably the most talented public school team to date that I think I've witnessed. Probably
Me as well. Me as well.
it was just ridiculous.
Unreal. Yeah. So when you think about high school basketball now, in the Tidewater area, in Hampton Roads, there's not that many private schools that take top players. There's some, but not that many. Richmond, you've always had Benedictine. You've always had St. Chris. You've always had
Trinity,
Trinity's now is a threat. They had Armando Baycott.
yep.
Where is high school basketball now? I mean, Hopewell seems very talented. Highland Springs still talented. Are good players still playing for the public schools, or is it gone like most of the country? Your top players going to private schools?
So I think yes, there are very good players still playing without a doubt. I think today, the past 10 years, more so than ever, you're still seeing great players playing, but you're seeing I won't say probably mostly your elite ones, particularly your bigs, are going to private schools. They're going to boarding schools. I think there's less. I think there's less kind of. I hate to use the word loyalty, but I think there's less kind of ties. I think it's kind of this NIL kind of time period, or I want to get mine time period when there's not so much allegiance to the neighborhood you grew up in or the competition of the rivals of the schools. It's, what can I do to kind of position myself? It's taking a very college or almost a pro mentality of I want to get mine while I can get it. And I mean, and I didn't meet too many people who don't think that their kid is not, a lottery ticket or the next, he's going to be NBA or they're going to be this or that. And to my point, when I was a coach, I was dealing with it is I always believed if you can play, they will find you and they will want you. Don't get suckered into this thing. You've got to go this route to be successful. Go that route because it's what you want to do, not because it's what you believe you have to do. Ed Davis, classic example. He went to Hanover. Terry Davis's son went to Hanover his first 2 years and did a great job there and brought them up as they were a newer school coming on and kind of came on the region scene a little bit. They didn't do too much damage, but enough. That's when I believe Carolina, I think they offered him then, but if they didn't, when he went to Benedictine, it happened very shortly after. And I always say, if Ed Davis would have stayed at Hanover, do you think North Carolina still wouldn't have offered him?
We don't want him.
And ditto Baycott. Baycott was a Verona kid. Had Baycott gone to Verona, would he ended up at Carolina as an example? I mean, so you can go on, and you can take the same thing in baseball. If you can pump at mid 90s, you're right-handed pitcher, you're probably going to get drafted. You're left-handed, you can write your own ticket. But I mean, I think there's been so much. It's almost like the fleecing of the parents and the players by these coaches. Just kind of sell them. I feel like a used car almost.
Yeah. What about the kid that went to Atlee this year from John Marshall? Now, here's a kid, John Marshall.
Difference maker.
He was amazing. I got a chance to watch him play. I just had an incredible year. What a great team. They can shoot the ball well coached. He's at John Marshall, a national program. But look, they basically play glorified friendlies most of the year because their league play, they're going to be every team they're in their conference, in their classification by 50 points, even though the state final was
sure.
relatively close. This kid went to a class 4A Atlee, won a state title. That's an example of what you're talking about. He had a great year. If you're a great player, you could probably do well wherever you are.
Absolutely. I think people, again, everybody I think shoots the stars, and that's a great thing to do. But I think that what they don't understand is there's only but so many spots that can be filled up on a said team and in a rotation. So it's kind of you want to be a bigger fish in a smaller pond, or do you want to be a smaller fish in a bigger pond? And I think ultimately you got to do what fits you and your family, your situation. And I think just people are more willing than ever to figure out ways to move from place to place, and they're making it happen. And that's tough. I mean, it's kind of a trickle down effect from what you're seeing at the college level, and it's coming into the high school level. It's been that way. It's gotten, I think, a lot worse over the years.
Yeah. Now, are you as frustrated as I am? Back when you were playing and I was playing, not everyone went to the state tournament. You had to be really special. And then when you got to the state tournament, you're going to have to beat some teams that you may not have to beat. I mean, you're going to have to really play well. Things are going to have to go your way. It was really hard to win a state championship when we were playing. Nowadays, it's still hard to win a championship, but let's face it, the competition is watered down amongst 6 different classifications. You got John Marshall in Class 2, you got Hopewell in Class 3. Class 6 is mostly the wealthier Northern Virginia schools. They don't have to even play the Tidewater schools, which are in Class 5. You don't have the same state tournament as we used to have. Do you think we're missing out by not having 3?
I completely think we're missing out, and I really, again, I'm not frustrated as much as I feel like it's just a different time. And I think it lends itself more so than ever to, you can't really compare eras of, okay, is this team that won the state championship in the 1970s or 80s, how do they stack up against the team that won it in the 2000s? And I know you can do it, but I think it's tough to do because everything is just so much different. It doesn't mean it's better or worse.
Yeah.
I just think it's different. But the reality is, and again, I wasn't part of the whole. I never understood the switch from you go from 3 classifications to 6. Again, to your point, I think now it seems like the 6 it becomes classifications. A state championship is almost, or a state tournament is almost like a region on steroids. It's not a, again, you do the math. Right now, you've got 315 schools roughly in the VHSL. It's added a few schools, obviously, but if you were to divide that roughly in 3, you're talking, let's say, 100 and 105, 110 schools, single A, double A, triple A. Well, obviously, if you're the best of 110 schools, that's at one level. If you're the best of 52 schools, I mean, that's good. Don't get me wrong. That's just a different level. And so, and the neat thing about that was, I'll tell you also, Julian, was in 13, we won the last AAA state championship. And then it shifted over in 14. We got to the state championship and lost. One of the most memorable team, overachieving team. We lost to Potomac and Trey Porter and Randy Haynes and
That was a
Keith
great
Connery's
team.
state championship. We lost to them. We deserved to lose to them. They were good. And then in 15, we won it again in 5. So point being, we won the state championship in Class 3A and then in Class 5. And Class 3A, I mean, we had to walk a pretty, significant just minefield around the Richmond area, then much less get to Kickingham or Hampton and W.T. Woodson. And then we circle back with playing JM in the state championship in 13, which was cool because neighbors, rivals, I mean, literally not more than a half mile down the road. Just they in their city, we're in the county.
Yeah. We were talking about that Robert E. Lee team. Now Lewis, that 88 team, they had missed Grant Hill because he was in a different bracket. But then in the state, they had to beat a Booker T. Washington team that was rated in the top 25 in the nation.
Yep.
They beat that Marshall team that was one of the best teams I've ever seen. It didn't win a state championship, and they lost to that Patrick. Can you imagine? They had to do all that to win a state championship. So
And imagine if you flip that around, if it was 6 classifications today, they wouldn't have had to walk that rope right there. And it's yeah. So I think that's, and not to mention too, it's different now because you have so many games. You can play literally the state championship and only have left your gym one time and played in the finals, which is, I mean, I get it. It's a financial thing, but it just takes the whole tournament feel and atmosphere out of the equation.
not only that, they were using the home refs at the home. So that the lower C was traveling and they were using officials from the association of the home. I'm like, how in the world can you stack that? That's why if you look at this year's state tournament, it was all favorites all the way. I mean, we were asking the underdogs to do too much. 15, 12 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, you would get a 10-loss team that somehow got some upsets and they got into the state. Now it's very hard because you're on the home floor of the best team, and there's only a few elimination points. It is so you have to try to get your season ended nowadays. There are so many second and third and fourth bites of the apple. So
I'm with you. Well, look, when we played early on at Henrico, we made our first runs to get in the state tournament. We traveled the road 95 and played Bentley and Wakefield
yeah.
up a couple times at Robinson. And but to that point, obviously that wasn't their home gym, and we played them with officials that were from the East. So I mean, again, it was a lot more of a neutral setting,
The
even though it was
tournament,
a
it's a
high school
tournament
setting.
feel. Yeah.
Correct, and
Yeah.
it was fantastic. I mean, yeah, with Westfield, Doug Yule, and that group with Alcano, the big
Yeah.
7-footer, and so yeah, that's kind of the feel. It was cool going up there, but you knew you weren't going to get the hometown referees, which again, referees do a fantastic job, but you just need to take that out of the equation and bring people in at that level, in my opinion, when you get that high.
There's no doubt about it. Even if you're the best ref in the world, you have a relationship with that team that you don't have with that other team. You're going to
Correct.
see it. You're going to see that team 4 or 5 times the next year. You may never see the other team again. So it's going to be in the back of your mind whether or not you want it to be or not. So why put people in that the Riverside folks were so mad they had to go to Albemarle, sold house, and they had the local Piedmont officials and they were so upset about that game. But I know it's not intentional. I know we do the best we can. Do you think that we're going to go back to at least at most 4 classifications? Or are we stuck with the 6 for the end of time?
That's interesting you asked that because I hear more banter about that amongst like coaches and fans. than I actually hear of that at VHSL meetings.
Of
Uh,
course,
you
nothing
know,
ever happens.
right? Well, it's yeah, I really, in my mind, I wish we'd go back to the three, but okay, if we can't go back to the three, which I didn't understand why, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of thing. Four would be like a hybrid between
Exactly.
those, and it would kind of restore some of the purest kind of parts to it. And again, I don't know. I think at least for the next 2 years, obviously it's not going to change. And then I think with anything, it'll be interesting now that Billy Hahn is stepping down and retiring and Ty Gafford's coming in. It'll be interesting to see what kind of thumbprint that he wants to put on it. And I'm optimistic that maybe that can be something brought to the table again seriously and can be brought up.
Even if you have four, you would really make it easier to make districts because, like, for example, up here in Loudoun, they can go with North Fairfax County schools. They could be one region. The Richmond and Norfolk schools that are five now would be brought back up. It would just make it more of a state tournament. Now, 6A is basically a regional tournament with, like, Deep Run with Oscar Smith, and just, like, there's like several schools.
Outliers.
Yeah, several schools below Fredericksburg are six. The rest of them are all above Fredericksburg. So it's just, I don't know, it's just not the way it used to be. But I know there's nothing that you're going to be able to solve. You're going to
Well,
be
the
able
system, it obviously, I think it needs some tweaking. And again, I know it's that inevitable argument when you get the NCAA tournament time. Is 68 enough, or should they go to, whatever they should go to? So I don't know. And again, usually sitting in the AD world more than ever, and this is where it's kind of opened my eyes or made me more aware that decisions are mostly made for money. That's usually what drives the decisions that are made. Let's have the regional tournament where it was all to college venue. Great idea, but it costs you an arm and a leg to do it. Let's have all three rounds of the state tournament at a certain, like, college set. Great idea. It costs you exponentially more. So again, when in doubt, usually run to the money, and that'll be the determining factor of why decisions are made.
Yeah, it makes sense. And those are things that fans like me don't see. But I would argue if that John Marshall team would have played South Lakes in the state final, that you would have had 12,000 people to see that game. I still think if we put the best teams together, we're going to help the brand. You're going to keep more schools away from the private schools in the public. If we increase the competition level, I think there are things we can do. But I guess there's always going to be.
I'm with you 100% on that. You don't have to convince me. I mean,
It,
it's just I think again, it helps the product. Now, what you don't get is you don't get the everybody kind of gets a trophy or ribbon mentality kind of going on. But I don't know that really is, I don't think that's really a great thing either. When again, waters the product down.
exactly. Well, I want to get to your coaching career. When did you know that you wanted to be a coach?
Yeah, I'd say probably when I was about 8 years old. I mean, I knew. I mean, there's just something. Obviously, I wanted to be a player as long as I could. Don't get me wrong, but there was something about the playing the coaching was an extension of the playing in my mind because you could have a lot of influence on the outcome of the game, and even really you could argue you could have more influence based on how you went about your game plan. So I mean, I just loved. I mean, sitting down with it was back in the day when you didn't have cable TV. You had three channels. You got the Raycom like game of the week, or Jefferson Pilot with Thacker and Packer, and
Yeah.
I'd sit down with my parents with there, and we watched the broadcasted game coming in the '70s or the early '80s, and hey, what would you do? Or in this situation, I mean, I was always just thinking the game and watching the game and just loved it. So yeah, I knew then that's when I wanted to get into coaching.
Yeah. You forgot Monday nights and the Big East are going on the ESPN.
Oh, yeah, Bill Rafferty and Dwayne the Pearl. I
Oh, you
mean,
had Patrick Ewing, you had Chris
yes,
Mullin. I mean, those were the golden years of college basketball. There's never been anything like the early years of the Big East, and the ACC was Jordan, and it kept getting better until probably, I guess, probably the '90s or so. But talk about when you were, I guess you were assistant coach or JV coach over at Tucker. When you became the head coach, did you know exactly what kind of coach you wanted to be?
yeah, I wanted to be a really successful coach who was always competing for championships. So the guy who brought me in at Tucker, his name was Chris Brown, or his name is Chris Brown. He was an assistant at Tucker for a long time. Probably when I was in high school, he was an assistant at Tucker. He was right out of college, or right around towards the end of college. So we had a relationship there. When I graduated college, he brought me over to Tucker. I was his assistant for, I guess, 5 years or so. And we worked super well together, just great chemistry. And Tucker wasn't blessed with a ton of basketball talent, to put it mildly. I mean, Tim Legler is the most famous name that came out of Tucker, and obviously graduated and went to LaSalle and had a tremendous basketball career and ESPN analyst. So for 2 years, I was the head coach there, and I loved life. I mean, I was golf coach, I was basketball coach and tennis coach. I mean, had great. Not married. I mean, all the time in the world to dedicate to my teaching and my coaching craft. But the ceiling was just what the ceiling was. It was just, we'd have open gyms and workouts, and you'd have 10, 12 kids show up, because if you weren't in winter season, you played a sport in the fall or spring, and you could never generate like a ton of interest from just a basketball pod of kids.
Why?
I mean,
Why is that? Why
there was
couldn't Tucker?
it was so much to do, so much going on. It's very similar to Freeman. I mean, we've got a gazillion sports. Field hockey, lacrosse, swimming. I mean, every sport is a varsity and JV team, so there's always something going on. So you just learn to share athletes, and if you've got a strong core of athletes in a said sport, okay, you're great. But if you've got a limited supply of athletes that aren't in a certain sport, you're only going to be but so good. And that's my opinion. That's my anecdotal kind of opinion about that.
And
So
Henrico doesn't have that. Doesn't have that problem.
Henrico, basketball is king. Now, the football, I'd say it was probably 75-25 basketball to football. Now it's a little bit probably closer to 50-50 there. It's a lot of based on winning, but those are the main two sports. They've got other sports going on, but those are what you do. That's what the community is all about, football and basketball. And they'll ride the one that is hot, or the one that's been the best. And so, as I just talked about open gyms at Tucker, I'd have 12, 13 kids show up. I'd go to Henrico, particularly when I first got the job, there would be 50 or 60 kids in the gym. I mean, fighting to get a run, fighting to play. Kids would be dribbling the basketball down the back roads and riding their bikes to go play. I mean, the interest, you had to kick kids out of the gym, go home. You got to go home. You got to do schoolwork. You got to take care of your other stuff. It was, I mean, and that's what I loved. I mean, because that's me, the passion of just playing basketball and being around it. But what I had to do was take and get that understanding that, okay, but you've got that love for it. Now we got to focus it towards taking care of business with your academics and your discipline. And then we can take the next step. I started when I first got there, we'd do open gyms, and I would do them early in the morning. I'd do them at 6:30 in the morning. Why are you doing it 6? Do them after school starts, coach. Why don't you do it 6:30? Because I want to see who's dedicated. I want to see what families are willing to make the commitment. And I have a relationship with the principal where I said, I'm going to help solve some of the discipline issues around school, because if you want to be a part of the program, you better be to school on time. You better take care of your business. And you do that by instilling that discipline and that carrot and stick. And, we won right off the bat big. And I'm telling you, it took off like I thought it would take off. Chris Brown and I always talked about, like, my goodness, you look at some of the schools in the Richmond area, and I'm not going to name names, but you can go down, there's a handful of them, like, okay, school A, woo, a lot of talent, can't get it together. School B, they got some talent, but there's some issues happening there. For whatever, there's a lot of maybe off the court issues. Henrico was one of those schools where I knew, remember I told you my dad worked there, I grew up there, I knew what that community was about. I knew just blue collar, hard nosed, hungry, got the edge, and they just needed that next little thing they could get, and they would just, from there, the sky's the limit.
Coach, you didn't mention if you practiced before school, you're too tired to get in trouble during school as well.
No, we did not practice before school, because all the leg work was done, because in the off season, between the summer and the fall, that's when we did our work before school. So once it got to the school year, the kids knew, like, okay, this is classroom time now. The court is an extension of the classroom. So that's how we're going to roll with that. And I'm telling you, it was, I mean, I loved it. I never worked for 27 years of my, well, I never worked for those 20 years of my life at Henrico. It was always just a thrill to be in the classroom and be knowing that you're helping kids and helping a community. I mean, and it kind of hit the pinnacle. Well, really, maybe didn't hit the pinnacle, but was near the top when we played John Marks in the state championship in 13. And I'm telling you, like, just the community was on fire, and people were they were going around scalping tickets. The community was to get into the game.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we'd have conversations with guys like, you can't do stuff like that. You can't control the community. But I mean, it was a fun environment over there.
It sounds wonderful, Coach. How long does it take a coach to become, really good at what they do? And the reason why I ask you, I mean, you can get lucky, but as a coach, you got to be able to hire assistant coaches, hire a JV coach. You got to be able to run a program. You got to be able to talk to parents. You got to be able to talk to principals. Being a head coach is different than being a JV coach or being an assistant coach.
Yes.
How long does it take to become a good coach?
I don't think you can put a one size fits all number on it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it takes perspective. I think it takes wisdom. I think it takes experience, and I think it takes a little luck too. And what I mean by luck is, it takes a few of the right people being on the same page, and more specifically, it takes the principal understanding the principal's their vision has kind of got to match your vision, because if one's got a vision that it doesn't really have what you're trying to do in mind, you're going to be treading water, and it's not going to happen. If you've got a principal that's on board with your vision, that's a big step right there, particularly at a public school, in a private school, particularly public school. That's number one. Two, you've got to have a community that is, I think, it's hungry and it's got an edge, and it's not entitled, not spoiled, not having everything given to them on a silver platter. They've got to work for something. Remember I told you earlier about those in the Henrico County, you've kind of got west, central, east. You could go to the west, go to the student parking lot, and that's way nicer than the teacher parking lot. You go to the central, it's probably at 50-50. You go to the east, you got a handful of cars, most of the kids riding the bus. And I wanted to be in that setting where the kids were riding the bus, that everything wasn't handed to them, that what they used basketball as a way to get out of the situation they were in. That's what I wanted. And so it takes talent, it takes vision. It takes a lot of things. So it depends. Just having the talent in and of itself doesn't guarantee you're going to be successful, but it's a great start to it. You got to have a few other things as well.
Yeah. Well, Coach, I was watching my favorite basketball movie this weekend. Seen it a million times, Hoosiers. And,
yeah. Welcome. Look, my dog is named that because that is the all-time greatest movie. Period.
It's a great movie. Make sure you check out the deleted scenes on YouTube, because they have scenes they had to cut out because it had to be under 2 hours that are amazing and add more description. But anyway, after they win the state championship, there's a moment when Gene Hackman looks up into the stands and catches Barbara Hershey's, and they have this wonderful glaze. And here's a guy who was in trouble, went to this small town, and he's not making a lot of money, but you could tell it changed winning that state title just changed his life. It made everything better, if only for a moment.
Yep.
How did winning a state championship change your life?
It made it very exciting. I'll tell you that. I mean, Henrico was built in 1962 and had 0 state championships in any sport.
Is that right?
Teams did not have a state championship in any team sport.
It's like Virginia Tech.
So yeah, says the guy with the Virginia hat on. It's a community that it's a successful and it's a winning community, but it's one that, like, there's no new development going on there. It's kind of, they're not things being brought over like fancy shopping malls and things like that. It's just a 19 kind of 50s through 90s feel to it, as far as development goes. So being a part of that and seeing that community one where I kind of not, I didn't grow up in that community in terms of living there, but I grew up in terms of watching it develop. And they had some unbelievable teams, the Rayford Giles and Daryl Jackson for Coach Guy Davis, and team on the 1977 team won the region, lost to TC Williams in the state tournament. I mean, so like they had their runs here and there, but they just couldn't quite put it all together. And to see a community embrace like our team and our kids, and what I think that's an experience I'll never forget. And just watching our program evolve from being like we were pretty good locally to going like we became, I think like Max Preps, all their numbers for the decade of the 19, what was it, the 2010s or whatever, we were one of the top 10 programs, Max Preps in Virginia, public or private. Seeing kids that came into high school who were just normal old regular kids from middle school who got maybe cut as a ninth grader at Henrico and just worked their tail off to become Marvin Smith Jr., one of the kids I had cut as a ninth grader, played sparingly in the JV, worked his tail off, and now he's playing professionally, in Europe. And he's only one of many. There's so many stories like him. And of course, obviously, DeMonte Buckingham is the guy that everybody remembers from university. Went to Richmond and then was A-10 Rookie of the Year, and he Player of the Year a couple times in the state. So anyway, but what I'll take from it is it changed my life because it gave me a sense of like an accomplishment with a community and that I love to death.
Yeah. It is interesting because a lot of times you win a state championship with a team that you weren't sure you're going to win it with. And then the ones that you're pretty sure you have a great chance, they're the ones that sometimes lose. So I know you won 2 of 3. Did it make sense? Did your best teams win it? And the team that didn't win it, like I said, the one that was in the middle, were they not as good as the other teams, or how would you?
So, yes, to answer your question, the 13 team, there was probably 4 or 5 teams in state could have laid claim they could have won the championship. You had, Cat Barber, with the Hampton group, had just beat us in 2012 in the state semis, and they had, if I'm not mistaken, they had all 5 of their starters coming back for Walter Brower's group in 13, but Kickotan with Rajay Bullock and I can't remember the shooter's name. They knocked him off in the Eastern Region semis, I believe it was. So they took care of business there. So they could have, easily. We were fortunate to beat them. Ivan Thomas was their coach.
Yeah, great coach.
Yeah, and then WT Woodson with Doug Craig. They had a great team in the state semis. A young sophomore point guard. That's right. Mm-hmm. Don't remember where he ended up, but great team. And then and John Marshall happened to be the third time we played them that year, and just beat them. So 13 was a great team, but we were one of I felt like we were one of the top 5 teams in the state for sure. Could we win it? It's just like the Final Four this year. If you just said, give me Duke, I'd take the field over Duke. Give me Houston, I'd take the field. There was so much balance and parity. There's no one team. I think that was we were in 13, but we were in so much sync. 14, by far our least talent, but we were riding off the fumes of the 13 team. Our center was a 5'11" kid who quit the year before in basketball, and here he's matched up with Trey Porter, a 6'10" kid. And then now we could have matched up with the other kids like Haynes, some of their guards, but we just didn't have the interior piece to go. And Andre did a great job, and it was his time and their time. And then 15, when we're now in 5 classes, we were good. We were really good. We didn't have a home gym to play in for our first 18 games. We were in the midst of a 33-game win streak. Colonial Forge broke that. They were on a back-to-back. They beat us by 1 point in our holiday tournament on a different floor for Jason Johns and that team at Colonial Forge. But we played Norview for the 3rd time that year. It was we beat them twice already. It was a foregone conclusion. In my mind, I never said that, but man, it was our time. We weren't going to be stopped.
Yeah. Coach, it must have been tough giving up coaching, but at least you're coming home to Freeman to be an AD.
Toughest decision of my life. I got to be, as far as from a professional decision, to be able to. And I tell you what, it probably was the fork in the road when we got COVID in 2020. So COVID, hits March 13th. I think pretty much the world shuts down then of 2020. We had just come off. We won the regional championship. We beat Verona. We just played the week before. In fact, we played Norview in 2020 the week before. They beat us in the state quarters in a close game, and then everything shuts down from there. The next year, no school. I mean, we were dots on a computer screen teaching school. Everything was shut down. No sports. Henrico County shut down all sports. And then the AD job at Freeman came along. In the 70-year history of Freeman, there's only been 4 ADs.
Wow.
And it's like that job never comes open. I went there, and it was like, do you run from happiness, or are you coming back home? I mean, how are you? Anyway, my daughters, one graduated from here, one is a ninth grader here. So it's like, how many opportunities do you get to actually be with your kids and your family? And it was a tough decision, but COVID, I think, probably made it easier and more difficult in some ways.
What's the key to being a good AD?
Keeping your sanity and having a great deal of patience. Because I can tell you it's, and I don't know. I mean, hopefully, I think from my seat, having been a coach, trying and give the coaches all the resources they need to be successful. If you can do that, I think that's one major step to being a successful AD. You're never going to give them everything they want because, as I saw, I mean, coaches are looking through their lens and they see their lens and how it impacts them. What most of them don't understand is the decision that's made for you and your team also can have this ripple or domino effect on other teams on the program. So it's not sometimes as simple as a plug and play decision. So, but I just miss the daily interaction with the kids and watching building them from ninth graders to seniors and ultimately go off from there. It's a different animal, and it's rewarding to some level, but not near as rewarding as teaching and coaching, in my opinion.
Yeah. Do you ever have coaches want to pick your brain, like a basketball coach or even other coaches know of your success, and they ever like come to your office and say, look, what do you think about this? Do you ever give advice to your coaches?
There's probably a handful of them that come in here, not necessarily basketball. I mean, I probably go out of my way to give the basketball the most space that I possibly can, because I don't want them to feel like, oh, you're trying to micromanage me or whatever. I mean, I try and stay away from doing that. So, but if somebody, it's funny, like, I guess in my second year, certainly some of the things I believe in, like challenging your individuals and your team to try and see if you can stretch them. One of the big components for us taking the next step at Henrico was we started scheduling, like, routinely 7-5-7 teams and events, and going out of taking the kids on trips, like day trips, to hard to play places. Because I knew in order to win the state, to the point we talked about earlier, you're going to have to play a tough environment with hometown referees. What do you get when you go to those showcase events? You get tough environments, you get mostly hometown referees, and you're the underdog, no matter how good you are in a lot of cases. That's what I insisted that we do, because I wanted us to be prepared before we got to the state championship and said, wow, what do we do now? Oh, we'd walked it. We'd done it. So I tried to bring that mentality. I still bring it to my better programs at Freeman. And I've had a couple coaches get a little put out with me, like, why in the world are you scheduling us these ridiculously like good teams? And but it's been rewarding, because in a couple of those cases, they either won the region championship or came back and won the state championship, because they had played private schools that were really good, or some other schools out of classification that were really good. And it's like, you know what? I think in hindsight, it actually helped us, experiencing what the best competition looked like. I'm telling you, that iron sharpens iron.
That's right. Coach, last question, and this has been great. If you ever had the opportunity to go to Henrico to be the AD, and I'm not saying that would be a step up because I know you're home, but would you just accept the fact that it's a basketball and football community, or as AD, would you try to say, hey, look, what do we got to do to make us competitive in soccer and lacrosse and field hockey, tennis, and the other things? How would you handle that?
So to answer your question, no, I would not go to Henrico to become an AD, because I had that opportunity when we were in our run, and our longtime AD stepped down, said, I know eventually you'll probably want to look in that direction. Are you ready you want to hit the next step? And I said, I'm not ready.
Yeah.
I'm not ready. I'm not ready because if I'm going to be at Henrico, I'm going to go over there with the basketball and make that the best it could be. And I certainly have a love for the community, but I love the basketball part of what makes that so great. I mean, because again, from my lens, my perspective, that's what I know. That's what I loved. Certainly, I loved it. If our track and tennis team and volleyball did great, hey, basketball at Henrico, it's second to none. I mean, as far as the high school part, from my love there and interest there. So the only spot I would have been an AD, I kid you not, is where I'm sitting right now.
Right.
If any other AD job opened up, no interest.
Yeah.
Why? I could come back home. I could be with my kids. I could be with my family. I felt like I'm growing my community out at Freeman. And Ranko, all about the hoops right there, buddy.
Yeah. Well, Coach, man, this has been great. It's so nice to meet you. I'm glad you took time to do this. I've been trying to get you on for a little bit, but it's been great. I'll make sure I'll say hi to my I'll say hi to my friend Rob from you. But just it's great to meet you, and hopefully we can keep in touch.
I would appreciate that. I tell you, I love, again, I think I grew as a coach and our program grew when I started to kind of spread ourselves out and get connections with the honorary, Keith Honorary, and then, watching obviously Kendall Hayes, do his thing on the sideline. And then, I'd go up when we were trading, this was back in the day when you had to trade films. I would go up, with Coach from Edison, who's no longer at Edison. I can't remember. Terry Henderson.
He's
Yeah,
at West Spring. He's at West Springfield.
Okay. I mean, we would meet at the Wawa on 95 somewhere and exchange of VHS tapes and talk basketball. And then, I mean, just a great relationship. And Doug Yule. I mean, there's a bunch of people that I was able to kind of meet and kind of broaden our horizons, and mostly or like through the VHSL coaching clinics.
Yeah.
I mean, which they don't do anymore, which is they're doing that. That's people don't know what a shame that is, by growing some of these young coaches out and making connections like that. But again, that's a whole other story, a whole other episode.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll keep in touch. Maybe we can talk about that one on a later episode.
Perfect. I appreciate you having me on, and it's you don't know how many things, how many lives you touch and bringing back great memories. So I'm appreciative for that. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks. Well, thanks for saying that. You guys do the heavy lifting. I get to enjoy the sport and talk to lots of great people. So I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, sir. You're the smart one. Thank you.
All right, Coach. Have a great day, buddy.
Take care, Julian. Bye.